the coming months now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda.
Meanwhile, the Mayor of Greater Manchester says that if the northern leg of HS2 is cancelled, it'll send a signal to the people living there that they're second-class citizens. Rishi Sunak's widely expected to cancel the HS2 connection from Manchester to Birmingham in his speech tomorrow, offering alternative investments in northern infrastructure instead. Andy Burnham called on the Prime Minister to involve Labour in decision-making on HS2, adding that if the northern section is cancelled, it breaks multiple Tory manifesto pledges.
Beggars belief in some ways that they are about to do this, to pull the plug on that infrastructure that would pave the way for that new east-west line across the north, promised in not one, not two, but three of the last Conservative manifestos. But to pull that plug here in Manchester would show complete contempt for the people of this city region and of the north of England as a whole.
Well, the Prime Minister is due to speak tomorrow and he's told GB News he's the person to deliver change to Britain. He's defended his record on illegal migration, saying for the first time ever the number of small boats crossing the English Channel from France is down by a fifth. He also reiterated his plan to halve inflation and accused the Labour leader of being light on policy. Now, the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was dismissive of disaster the UK COVID-19 inquiry has been hearing today. The Bereaved Families for Justice group says there was a leadership void in the early days of the crisis. They went on to accuse Mr Johnson of cavalier public messaging just weeks before the first lockdown. The government's choices between January 2020 and February 2022 will be scrutinised as part of the inquiry. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Polly. Hello and welcome to Headliners. It's your nightly run through the next day's newspapers with three comedians. I'm one of them, I'm Leo Kearse, and I'm joined by the duo that answer the question, what would happen if Simon and Garfunkel discovered meth? It's Josh Howie and Kerry Marks.
I'll say that. I don't know. I heard Polly laugh. That was obviously a good link. You're making Polly laugh, then you did the good stuff.
I had no idea what it meant.
Just saying that we're both out of shape and ugly.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah,
oh, lovely.
And possibly
what a good way of starting a show. Thanks, mate.
Ravaged by drugs as well. And also one of you is taller.
I'm proud of it.
Anyway, let's get a move on and look at tomorrow's front pages. The Times leads with Braverman says migration hurricane is coming. The Telegraph has Sunak, I'll change the status quo. The Guardian leads with PM declares politics broken in bid to wrest back control. The Daily Mail has what a wig lifter. Not sure what that is. This was the first properly spellbinding, dramatically assured speech seen at a conference for years, and the longest headline. The Metro has it's justice for Jade. And finally, the Daily Star has psycho scumbag chatbots aren't all bad. And those were your front pages. And let's have a closer look at those front pages, starting with the Times, Josh.
Yeah, the big one. Braverman, migration hurricane is coming. And I don't know if that's this hurricane of migrants, if that's the allusion to net zero. If it's with climate change, it would have been otherwise sort of a gust or just a little windy, a little blowback of.
I think she's suggesting that the boats are going to arrive in an anti-clockwise direction.
Oh, very good, and depending on where you are in the we're up north. Yeah. Okay, that works. So this is the this is a big speech, and some people say the speech is rubbish. I think Nigel Farage said it was he didn't say rubbish because he's got bigger words than me. And then you saw there the Daily Mail saying this is the best speech ever. Yeah. But other people are saying this is and this is from the Independent. Also said that it was escalating. The Times have gone with a sort of somewhat neutral approach to it, saying that, she's attacking celebrity critics, which is totally valid in my book.
Oh, absolutely. And she makes the valid point that, you know, people have luxury beliefs, and if you're rich, then you're going to benefit from mass migration because you'll have cheaper nannies and cleaners and all the rest of it. But if you're a working class person who's going to compete with those people for jobs, then it's going to be tougher for you.
Yeah, I mean, do you want...
well, I mean, obviously this is happening at the Tory party conference, which most of the public and the Tory party don't know is going on. And she's basically given a very divisive speech, I think deliberately. I think she wants to show herself as very strong on this issue, and it's confusing to many on the left when minorities don't take the stance they're supposed to. You know, like, you're supposed to think this way and you don't, and it doesn't make any...
Yeah, because she herself is the daughter of migrants who came across from Uganda. I believe. Of course,
but refugees aren't all one thing. The experience of refugees through different ages, different places, and so on changes dramatically, and people want to see it as a single issue, which it isn't. It changes a lot. But I mean, there's a part of me thinks when a minister's going to learn that this kind of language of using metaphors with migration, deluge and floods and swarms and so on never really goes down with the public. Because what the public really want, I think what you'd find is what they want is solid, active policies, but with really gentle talk. That doesn't make them feel bad.
And instead, we've got the opposite. We've got all this hard talk, and the government's allowing, 25,000 so far this year to come across illegally.
But she is right. This is a huge issue for our future, and we haven't seen anything yet. You know, as the climate changes around the world, we are going to see a massive migration across the sort of equator planet countries, upwards and down. You know, and of course there do need to be policy. You could almost see this as, even though for people who are losing their jobs, all the effects that we're seeing right now, this is almost like the trial period for what's really to come.
Yeah. My theory is we need to make the country less appealing, Just
well, this is
really
what do you think the Tories have been doing for 13 years?
Yeah, but still people want to come here.
No, but that's it. We want to go to Sweden, go to all these other to enjoy their systems. But I think the Tories have done a great job trying to alienate migrants coming.
If we run ad campaigns in North Africa saying, have you thought about Scandinavia? That'll be enough to divert them away. Anyway, moving on, what have the Telegraph got on the front cover, Kerry?
Where are we? The Telegraph is Sunak saying, I will change the status quo, which... I don't fully understand this, because isn't he the status quo? I mean, the Tories have been in power for 13 years. And I think even however you take the intention here, it's going to seem laughable to the opposition to say, after 13 years of being in power, there's something wrong with power. And it's like, well, that looks like you then, doesn't it? Yeah. So I think that's the idea.
Why is he waiting until the next election to change? I mean, he's the Prime Minister now.
Yes.
In fact, there's a good chance this will be his only chance to make these changes.
Yeah. Both sides agree with him. This is what's happening. And everything he's talking about with the, the HS2 and so on, which he's mentioning in his speech, is so up and down, and no one really knows what's happening. And 1 minute it's going to go to Old Oak Common, which would have been lovely for them. Yeah, I think I think this is the absolutely genius reframing. So he's saying, Keir Starmer, he's the continuity. It's like you are literally the continuity. So it's incredible. Not that his ideas are necessarily that bad in terms of redoing A-levels, changing them, maybe making them a little bit broader. I know a lot of people out there feel very strongly about smoking, usually smokers. But I personally... There's not enough of it. They want more. And what about this other story about Boris Johnson's COVID decisions? Yeah, this is actually huge and frustrating and annoying for anybody who was told repeatedly, follow the science, follow the science. Well, when you follow the science, what you find out, and just to say the headline here, Johnson's COVID decisions were bipolar, reveals Vallance diary. So Sir Patrick Vallance, he was the chief scientific advisor, and basically kept these diaries, and they're kind of crazy when you're reading what was going on at the time, because he was basically saying they weren't reading these policy papers. People were changing the policy. Certainly things like the example here is this whole 1 metre, 2 metre rule and stuff, and that became such a part of the paradigm. And then it turns out no one in government actually read the thing, and then someone actually just changed it willy-nilly. Yeah. So all this thing of follow the science, it was just a bunch of arbitrary decisions made by people who didn't even read the stuff. Right, which we could kind of tell.
I mean, I don't think there are many people being like, yeah, this is all well thought out, and they know what they're doing. I think that's why so many people just didn't obey lockdown rules.
Well, it was exactly that. Was it remember 2 minutes, 6 metres, 62 metres? Not really sure anymore. It was all a rough idea, wasn't it? And with the parties going on and so on, it was quite clear. But also, this is the guy who wrote a paper for Brexit and against Brexit at the same time, side by side. To say he might be a bit bipolar is an underestimate, isn't it?
He keeps a foot in all the camps. Anyway, what's on the front cover of The Guardian, Josh?
Yeah, they've also got a picture of Suella Braverman. They also have the stuff about the PM. But the article they've got different is India kicks 41 Canadian diplomats out of Delhi. And this is a story that's been brewing now for a couple of weeks. There was a Hindu separatist. Was it a Hindu separatist or a Sikh separatist? This is terrible.
Sikh.
I'm going to have to learn. I only just learned the Sunni Shia
Sikh
thing,
leader.
so now I'm going to have to... yeah, thank you, Sikh. Anyway, the point is, he was murdered, and the Canadian authorities are saying that there's good evidence that it was carried out by the Indian government, and India has retaliated by kicking out a bunch of diplomats and also for closing down the call centres.
Right.
That's a lie.
But this is quite sort of James Bondy level stuff, and we've seen this a lot over the past few years. Russia was assassinating people in the UK. Now India is assassinating people in Canada. Apparently, I mean, this is quite.
It used to be war, didn't it? Like, to go onto someone else's territory and kill someone. That was war.
Not with Mossad. It was Mossad were allowed to do it.
I don't know. I haven't followed this story much, but it's of course. I think just in Canada, they're probably happy for any other story than they're welcoming and they're applauding Nazis.
I'll be interested to see, first of all, if India are going to be doing it, because India is a hugely growing country and is going to be massively influential. Already is. Yeah. This is a growing sign of the confidence. In terms of, maybe they're just sort of trying it in Canada where they're all such wimps.
A country that
try assassinating people in England and see if you get away with it.
Well,
you will.
And also Canada has had a huge influx of migration from India and other places, but in particular India. So, maybe they feel like, they've got some soft influence just with the number of boots on the ground in Canada.
One less boot.
Yeah. Moving on, what's on the front cover of the Daily Star, Kerry?
Well, we're told psycho scumbag chatbots aren't all bad, and it tells us psycho artificial intelligence chatbots might actually help humankind live longer and work less. But there's always this caveat that comes with AI: it's going to do that, but it might kill everyone. AI might help us make things better for people with disability, or it might kill them. And I think we always have this
like the government.
sex problems. Prisons, they will help with keeping prisoners, but they might kill them as well. So we never quite know. We're always on the edge with this.
It's kind of like the Tory government.
Yeah.
They might make things better, or they might just kill us all.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I think even the Tory government could work out what square contains a traffic light. Whereas that is the fatal flaw in any AI chatbot.
I got there.
I'll tell you something else that we looked up this week is that AI can do almost anything except jokes. It's not a very good joke writer.
Right.
Comedians are safe, except
not
punsters.
some comedians.
Except punsters. If you ask it to do puns on shoes or anything else, it's pretty good at it.
Okay.
Yeah. Puns are out.
Proving that puns are the worst jokes. Anyway, that's the front pages taken care of. Coming up in part 2, we've got prisoners getting trips abroad, a Tory candidate in hot water over racism claims, and the reason so many people are off sick. See you in a couple of minutes.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Leo Kearse and I'm still here with Josh Howie and Kerry Marks. And we're kicking off this section with The Telegraph, which is bad news for anyone currently in jail for sexually motivated murder, Kerry.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to like this. The whole life sentences without parole to be applied retrospectively. The Justice Secretary will announce new powers to suspend parental responsibility from any parent who kills their partner, which, now, I'm personally of the opinion that if your dad murders your mum, that's a red flag. You know, that means he's probably...
Not a good guy.
Not a good dad. Not best at the job. So now what will happen is that he will lose all fatherly, or you know, if it's a woman who does it, motherly responsibility to the child. So if your dad has behaved like that, they're no longer your dad, effectively. Yeah. Which is very interesting. The other thing interesting about this is a backdating of the law. So this will apply to offenders of those crimes who've been committed but not yet sentenced. Which is a really I always find that a really interesting thing, because I think people, like if you were to rob a train or something, you think you can weigh it up. This is the sentence I might get, this is the crime. But now we can, well, we've been doing this for ages, I think, since the train robbery, is to backdate the crime or the sentence so that it can be worse than you were originally expecting.
It's people who've been not convicted yet, that's what's interesting, because there's an incentive for those people who've been charged but not convicted to actually plead guilty. Right. Because if they do that now, it's going to go through before this becomes law. If they wait for it all go to trial and then they get convicted, then they could get... So there's a weird thing. They should sort of...
So is that why they're doing it?
No, I don't. I'm just saying this is going to be one of those bizarre sort of loopholes that's going to kind of happen in the next however long it takes for this law to happen. Right. Where there might be people who are waiting for their trials who might just suddenly go do a plea bargain and say, please... just put me up for 20 years or whatever. That will only be for now, though. Yeah, well, that's...
I think a lot of them will be kicking themselves, going, oh, well, this is a worse sentence than I was expecting when I did this, you know. And
they'll probably kick themselves quite hard, because they seem quite angry.
Yeah, they're very angry, aren't they? I tell you what always surprised me is that life sentences don't mean life in the first place. Yeah. You know, that we say, even the expression, a whole life sentence.
Should be like dog's life. Dog's nine life.
I think judges just like the drama of saying life, even when it's like 20 years. They go, I want to say life, though.
It's good, though. Look, these are two sensible policies. Life should mean life, certainly for sexually influenced murders and also the idea that a parent can have that kind of impact on their children after murdering their partner. This is good stuff. Also begs the question, why were these things not implemented before? But there we go.
Yeah. Anyway, staying with the prison theme, we've got the Mirror reporting on the government giving prisoners trips overseas at our expense. This country. Josh, fill me in.
They're basically going to get holidays.
Yeah, holidays.
And
foreign prisons.
Yes, they're going to go
learn a new language.
Those sweet Swedish prisons.
Different food.
Meatballs. Prisoners may be sent to rented foreign jails as Tories battle cell shortage. So this is just... we're supposedly going to run out of prison spaces in about 3 years. Already they're doubling up. They're doing what they can. They're refitting a lot of prison cells and whatnot to get these 20 extra prison spaces. And this is just one more thing about how this government, and it's not just even about being Tory, you know, forget the policies and whatnot. I think it's going to come down at the next election to just, is the other side going to get stuff done?
Yeah.
Because this government, whatever their different politics, they're just not getting stuff done. They're not getting prisons built and education, the schools and all these different things. So they're constantly years behind on this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's constantly chasing them, biting them in the arse. We're going to run out of... The idea that we have to rent out prison spaces in a foreign country...
But this could be
ridiculous.
this could be a great idea, Josh. I mean, Kira, you've seen Midnight Express. I mean, this is going to be much more of a deterrent than the cushy prisons you get in the UK.
What, the shower scene?
Yeah, all of it.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
There were no pleasant bits.
Going to Europe is going to be a deterrent.
Yeah, I think any. I mean, especially if they do some sort of deal with, I don't know, Indonesia
They've only said they're going to explore this. But to be fair to Alex Chalk, they said that they're going to explore every possible way of dealing with this prison problem, because the truth is they've got no ideas. There's nothing.
Do you know why they've got no
really
ideas? They've had, I couldn't believe when I read this, 10 justice secretaries in 10 years.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
That is, of course nothing's getting done. Personally, what about Space Station? Because there's that great film with Guy Pearce where all the prisoners get sent up to space.
Yeah.
Why not?
It's very expensive, though.
Oh, OK, yeah.
It's like sending someone to Rwanda.
The other thing is, has Europe got space in all their prisons? Well, what we should be doing is asking them how. Yeah. What are they doing right that they've got prison space that we can be renting off them?
They're letting prisoners flee across the channel. Anyway, we've got the Times now, and thanks to the focus on mental health, benefit scroungers don't have to pretend to have a bad back anymore, Kiri.
Ministers link mental health problems to rise in benefit claims. And this is Mel Stride, who's she's praising the treatment for conditions previously kept hidden, but what she's questioning is whether the mental health label...
It's a he, by the way.
He, that's what I said, he, but I just added an S for extra power.
That's a nice recovery.
I don't need to know everything to do this, do I?
No, I mean, I personally, I don't care. I just wanted to point out you were wrong.
Okay.
Anyway, we can't see the pronouns, so we're not sure.
I think we'll agree if you go through life called Mel, you should expect this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He, she deserves it.
Thank you.
Mel and Sue.
Mel's talking about mental health and...
Are you having a mental health crisis?
Saying this gone crazy. And, you know, I'm obviously, I'm mixing the comedian world, and I'm now, after going to Edinburgh, I'm the last comedian who doesn't have any issues. Everyone else has had a show about it. And there's this... I don't know. I think what's going on, though, is that there is first of all, there is a truth to it. There's more people claiming they have mental health issues because of social media is immensely depressing and constantly telling people to be upset and to be scared.
And they've invented new mental health syndromes that anyone can have. Like, anybody can get diagnosed with ADHD. That just anybody.
And once you do that and make it easy, anyone can get it. But what I'm saying is that there's a flip side to this, is that on the one side, it's all very real. And I'll read something like how I read this today about how pornography makes young people feel inadequate, and I think, yeah, that's awful. And then I flip the other side and go, yeah, but they are inadequate. You know, they should realise that about themselves, and they should not watch the Olympics. That will really upset them.
And it's okay to be humbled.
But obviously, the more you open the floodgate and say you can claim benefits for a thing, the more people are going to do that.
And we're seeing a huge rise in the number of people off sick long-term claiming benefits. It's up to 2.6 million people.
It's up a half since COVID, and the majority of that, and certainly amongst young people, the bulk of it is because of these mental health conditions. There seems there's two things going on here. Number one is this idea of over-labelling, which absolutely is part of this sort of cultural phenomenon now. But Mel Stride, male or female, seems to sort of go back and forth on it, where they're trying to be like all kind and nice. He's trying to be kind, but he's sort of saying, I don't want to like say people are shirking, but we basically need to get them off the door and get back to work. That seems to be the gist of it. But at the same time, he points out that this has been a tough time with lockdowns and whatnot for young people. They missed out on a very critical period of their life in terms of socialisation and whatnot. And so it's understandable if there is an increase in... But there's this other idea, and there's a paper that they sort of quote, where because people are better with the terminology, just being anxious, they will then sort of exaggerate it, and then that makes them more stressed. It's like you have sort of hypochondria,
they have a
but for mental health.
to be able to.
So the labelling can be, the diagnosis can be as harmful as the actual condition.
What's happened is mental health has gone crazy.
We've got The Independent now, and a Tory politician has been slammed by lefties for highlighting a growing perception of racism. But it's the kind of racism that left-wing people just don't care about, Josh.
Well, there's a lot of truth there, but there's also, it's not just lefties who are highlighting the ridiculousness of this. So this is Tory mayoral candidate criticised for saying Jews are frightened under Sadiq Khan. Now, I don't agree with many of Sadiq Khan's policies, but this is Conservative Susan Hall, who's going for the Tory candidate for the London mayor election. But saying that Jews are frightened, and she's supposedly quoting people in his constituency, is just not true. The fact is, Sadiq Khan has been a great ally to the British Jewish community. He's always stood up and confronted anti-Semitism when other people haven't.
That must have made him unpopular in the Labour Party.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good. But so this idea, and people are accusing Susan Hall of dog whistling here, and I got to agree with it. This is. I am the leader of all British Jews. And I'm telling you, that's just not true. British Jews are not. She's saying Jewish people are frightened of him. That's absolutely ridiculous.
But no, I mean, I've heard from other people that there is a rise in anti-Semitism.
Yeah, but it's not him.
Oh yeah, but I'm not saying it's not Sadiq Khan driving around in a car screaming in Golders Green that he's going to do terrible things to Jewish women, but it's happening in his London, and anti-Semitism complaints have doubled at London's universities. So there is a growing problem.
Absolutely, but that ties into stuff with the Middle East. It also is because of partly through left anti-Semitism. There's also a lot of anti-Semitism within the Muslim community that needs to be dealt with, like these guys driving around North London saying they're going to rape Jewish mothers and sisters and whatnot, and physical attacks on the street and whatnot. But this has got nothing to do.
It does because it's happening in London. It's happening in the city that he's responsible for policing in London. So
that is a wider police issue that I believe he has also failed in and whatnot. So, but I mean, I think that this is dog whistling or whatever, which I don't like particularly as an expression.
It's not even cat whistling.
It's not even cat whistling. There's a rise in anti-Semitism going on across Europe.
It's ever since we've been on headliners, really.
And in America and in the rest of the world. So obviously it's very difficult to say the reasons why it's happening in any one place, and then you can look to causes and say it's Sadiq Khan. But I don't think anything. I cannot think of anything Sadiq Khan has actually said that would, make him someone you would suggest yourself who you would point this at.
He's very
in fact, quite the opposite. I think he has on enough for any faults he's got. He's stood up for the Jewish community on a number of occasions. Margaret Hodge, who's of course Jewish and represents the East London constituency of Barking, has said it's a dog whistle, and I do think there's something nice about the leader of Barking recognizing a dog whistle when it happens. So
I'm so annoyed I didn't see that joke.
I wasn't proud of it, to be honest, but I couldn't help it.
Now you're making me hate Jews. I hate you specifically.
Moving on to The Guardian now, Kerry, and I think the Republican Party are copying GBNews by booting people out.
Well, this has just happened, isn't it? This is Kevin McCarthy has been ousted as US House Speaker. Now, this is the first House Speaker to be ousted in the history of America. So that's a real shame for the next one, because, who wants to be second or third or anything? So this is quite a big thing, I guess. And this is for a vote from his own party. So this has come from the hard-right Republicans. And we saw the acting House Speaker, which was Patrick McHenry, slam his gavel really hard.
Yeah, do an impression.
But it was sort of
video.
Can I
do it. Use a pen.
I thought I was going to break the set. It was,
do the pen. Use a pen. Use my pen.
Okay. Why are you getting me to do this?
What am I? That's your acting skills.
I'm sure he hesitated, going, I'm not quite sure how hard you hit a gavel for this one, because it's a first, you know, and he's setting a precedent for the rest of the times when this will happen.
They don't have a practice gavel round the back.
Yeah, and he's going, is this right?
It's weird.
That was Patrick Henry, and who was the House Speaker, and Senator McConnell was too stunned to speak about the whole thing.
But it's
and there's
weird.
a lot of mooks going on here, though. This is a lot. You've noticed all this mook?
What's a mook?
It's weird, though.
Lots of mooks. Well,
Getting back to what the actual story is.
And McHenry, it's all about McCarthy.
Getting back to what the story actually is. I mean, it's weird that...
Do we have to get away from the mooks?
We have to actually talk about the story, I'm afraid. But it's weird that the right in America, and it looks like Donald Trump could be getting back in with, you know, quite a sort of a swing to the right from where he was before. But they're anti-Ukraine. They're incensed that the USA is giving so much money to Ukraine, and also this, the
spending bill, which
the spending bill, which triggered all this.
The Democrats for
the spending bill, which triggered all this, is related to that's making sure that soldiers get paid, that people who are doing their jobs get paid. They're out there on the front line. They're
Kevin McCarthy is basically getting punished for compromising, which is kind of what you're meant to do at being an adult in politics, is compromise with the other side to put that bill through. So, as you say, everybody gets paid, who gets paid by the government, and can eat. And so he made a compromise. He's been punished by his own party for doing that. And I think this is wrong. I'm no fan. The Democrats kind of totally just knifed him in the back. I said, maybe that's the wrong analogy here, but whatever it is. They also went for him when he basically, with them, put that bill through, and they've said, actually, you know what, we're going to go for him as well.
Yeah, the Democrats are playing a dangerous game of chicken where they're trying to make the Republicans more right-wing. They're trying to amplify Trump. They're thinking, because we can beat Trump. But, man, they're in for a shock. They tried that last time. Anyway, that's it for part 2. In the next section, we've got trans bans, a pushback on sensitivity readers, and is classism the real prejudice in the UK? See you in a couple of minutes.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, kicking off this section with The Times reporting on government plans to ban women like me from female hospital wards. Kerry, this is literal genocide.
Yep, trans women will be banned from female NHS wards, says Steve Barclay, which I know Joshua will have more to say than I will on this, which is why I'm not going to let you in. I'm just going to say it. Loads of thoughts on this. First of all, I don't think this is just about... it's always being framed as danger to have trans women in women's space and so on. And it's not just about danger. It's about privacy and it's about people's expectations to have a safe environment and so on. What's surprising about this is you'd think hospitals would be at the top of the agenda on the trans debate, on the trans issues, above sport, above prisons and everything else, because this is a place that the women's wards are where women sleep, and they're on drugs. You know, and they're having to get changed and having all kinds of operations or, things carried out for them by nurses.
Advertising, Jesus. You're writing a guidebook here.
It seems odd that wasn't the first place we started talking about. I do think, though, that on the trans debate, what we've learned is that doctors get things very wrong. Like I identify as a middle-aged man and not as the age I was designated at birth. Wow, did they get that wrong? So they obviously know absolutely nothing. And I believe in accommodating people's feelings, but I think what this debate gets to is a point where, like, if you believe you're a dog, that's absolutely fine, but you're not allowed to take up a kennel when a dog's home. And in the same way, you can't take up a bed for women in a women's ward. So
it comes down to a pure safety issue, Josh.
It does come to a safety issue because there's an unbelievable story it's about a year ago it came out, but this woman was raped by a trans woman on a ward, or a person saying they were a trans woman. That's the thing, is it's not, when people think trans women and someone who's had surgery and whatnot, it's 96% of people who self-identify as trans actually just blokes with a wig or just long hair or whatever. So,
just like me.
Or they could just be a predator who's saying that they're a trans woman. That's the point. How do people know?
Yeah.
And so a woman was raped on a ward and then went to the police, and then the police went to the hospital and said, can you help us? This woman says she's been raped. And they said, no, it's impossible. There's only been women on this ward.
Right.
And then it took a year for them to investigate. And the only reason they did in the end was because this woman was able to obtain footage.
Right.
So, that's just one story on there. There was a private hospital also that cancelled someone's very important surgery because this person said they just wanted to be treated by someone of the same sex.
Yeah.
We're also talking about people with disabilities. We're talking about people with mental health conditions. And so they have their right to dignity. Trans women have the right to safety as well, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But it doesn't top-trump women, and that's always been the problem here. Julie Bindel says, and I've always wanted to quote Julie Bindel because it makes me sound like a big old feminist, even though my personal views don't know. Oh, yeah, good. Certainly if they've seen my set. But she says this is actually just single-sex wards being reinstated.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
And it's not as if the trans women are going to be lumped in with the blokes. They're going to get a private room. So it's actually a great way. It's a great way of getting a private room. If you just turn up and say, guess what, I'm a woman, private room for free. But anyway, moving on, we've got The Guardian now reporting on trans sport. And I wish I'd heard about this sooner. We could have been world champion swimmers just by turning up and changing our pronouns, Josh.
Well, this is it. Swimming World Cup category for transgender athletes cancelled after no entries received. Now, the World Aquatic organisation, they're one of the first world sports bodies to basically look into the scientific evidence and go, actually, if you've been through male puberty, you have massive physical advantages.
I was wondering how that sentence was going to finish.
So they then go, well, and one of the options that has been presented here is an open category. So the idea is that when these organisations have been slowly coming out and going, it's been presented as they're banning trans people from sport. They're not. They're just saying that you have to compete in the same biological sex. And one of the options is about having an open category, which they've done, and guess what? No one signed up to it.
Yeah.
So what does that suggest to me is, well, for some of these people, like Leah Thomas, who the famous American swimmer, who's a trans woman who won all the awards, was a mediocre male athlete, suddenly become a champion female athlete by saying that they're a woman. It's like, oh, well, what, you don't want to, basically, you want to cheat against women, and then suddenly when you actually have an option to play fairly, you don't want to go for it.
Yeah.
That, for me, is what it reads like.
Yeah. Kerry, do you miss...
I think it's really important, the point you're making is that the swimming authority spent months doing studies, calling in experts before they didn't make this decision lightly in the first place.
Yeah.
And after spending an absolute fortune on making that decision, they finally reached a conclusion that just about everyone knew, apart from a few idiots on TikTok, which was that men are stronger than women.
Yeah.
You know, it took all that effort.
But those idiots on TikTok have managed to implement their policy around the world.
Yeah.
That's the mental thing. With the Olympics, with everybody.
It's the problem of governments being in hock to special interest groups who have their ear and make the most noise. Anyway, moving on, we've got the Times, and a plumber has been awarded 130 grand for being booted off a WhatsApp group. If that's the going rate, then I'm owed about £78 million.
This is exactly right. 134,000 because he wasn't on a WhatsApp group with the company. Before I go further, can I just check, are there any WhatsApp groups with GB News that I'm not on?
Yes.
Yes? Then I'm taking you to court.
We were just talking about it.
I wouldn't even know this was... If I wasn't included in a WhatsApp group, I wouldn't even have thought
somebody
there's
must
a
have grasped them
possibility
up.
you can sue over that. But apparently this is obviously a landmark. This is new. And it was because he wasn't included in safety... So there were safety regulations that he wasn't going to know about, which, once again, I would have thought, great, I don't have to abide by those safety regulations.
But he hurt himself, didn't he?
But he hurt himself and he was off. So he wasn't working with the company at the time. So they probably thought, well, this is only for people who are here working, surely.
It's a slightly confusing article and case because that's not the reason he got awarded this money wasn't because he wasn't on a WhatsApp group. They're misrepresenting that. It's because of hurting himself at work and they didn't provide the necessary training and whatnot. But this
which
is
was in the WhatsApp group.
Which is part of it, but also elsewhere, and they didn't implement certain policies that they said they would. So, but this is like a side part of it that obviously is the most interesting for everybody because people want to be included at work. For example, Leo went to the TV Awards.
Right.
Yeah, and we didn't. He did indeed.
Really?
With GB, and we didn't get. No one else got asked. and I'm still genuinely upset about that.
Really, really awful.
Do you hear me, GB News bosses?
I thought the point of WhatsApp was not including people. You start a WhatsApp group. You want to talk about someone.
And the same with TV Awards. Anyway, the Guardian now with a warning about unconscious bias. This is why I make sure all my biases are very conscious and well thought out, Josh.
Indeed, and available for any boy on Twitter. Warning over unconscious bias against working-class pupils in English schools. This is a social mobility expert. He's written a book, Lee Elliott Major, and he's basically talking about there's a mindset in education that treats working-class children as inferior, and the second point is, and they try to deal with it by trying to make them into these what's called middle-class clones, a.k.a. me. This is interesting because remember there was this report on the big report on racism and whatnot, and they found that actually, like, it wasn't about race, wasn't a factor. It was different backgrounds, but the factor that is most dominant is going to be economic background.
Yeah,
and that is what, regardless of ethnicity and whatever, this person is arguing, this is what really needs to be examined. Because there are, and he's also saying stuff about, like, don't say disadvantaged and whatever. But the fact is that it makes a big difference. Now, I always complain on the show because I had to homeschool my kids and now they're all a bit thick and really behind. And because of being able to do the show, I am able to now pay £60 a week to a tutor to help my 9-year-old catch up and whatever. Now, that is a massive... £60 a week, I couldn't have afforded that a few years ago. And now I can. There are people who can't make that gap up. And that gap, if it's not made up, will have an impact on my son for the rest of his life.
Yeah. And also, thick people tend to not earn as much So, you know...
You said that really thickly.
I know.
I'm
not going to pretend. I mean, I thought I was middle class growing up, but it turns out I was just Scottish. I was just, you know, I'm just middle class for Scotland. You know, we had shoes and stuff like that. I had to move down to England to find out about cutlery. But yeah, I mean, classism is something that, you know, on one level, it kind of...
I'm not sure this is the right way of going about it, though. I mean, I don't want to sound opinionated, but this is stupid. This is all about language, and it's changing. What he's talking about is saying under-resourced rather than disadvantaged. And I always think these cosmetic changes aren't really doing very much at all. Yeah. Someone wrote a good article recently about how learning difficulties came from the term retard because that wasn't acceptable, but then that came from changing feeble-minded. And really, we're just changing words. We're not doing anything. What you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, actually, because the real things that make a difference aren't some of the ones that I think are being pointed out here. It's having tutors. It's the fact that richer kids get smaller classes. It's that they have parents who can help them. They generally have parents who are educated and are able to help them with their homework.
Parents who have the free time to be, who aren't working 2 jobs, who aren't working night shifts, who will read to their kids when they go to bed.
But they talk about also, I think what the guy here is saying is that using examples to his skiing holidays and going to the theatre is playing to the rich kids and alienating the poorer kids and so on. But at the same time, we teach aspirations in school, and so it's a thin line. You know, I don't know whether you change it to bingo and dog racing, whether the other kids are going to be going, oh, that's what we want to be doing later.
Do it all in Cockney slang. Bought a 2x2 with a 4x4. I don't know. Sorry.
I've just heard from our sensitivity reader that I've got to apologise for a word that was used during that segment, but I'll let you try and work out which one it is. Anyway, that's it for this section. Join us in a couple of minutes for reanimated animals, a plague of Parisian bed bugs, and crocodile helicopter sex. Sounds dangerous. See you soon.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the final section of headliners. We've got the Express now, and half of Brits say they know nothing about art, and the other half are liars, Josh.
Yeah, well, that's basically it, isn't it? I mean, this is one of my favourite genre of ad articles, which is like advertising a product. I'm not even going to say what it is, but yes, nearly half of Brits admit they are clueless when it comes to famous artworks. They have a list then of various different people. Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, Da Vinci's Last Supper. They said 3 in 10 people admit that said they never heard of Last Supper and whatnot. But then one of the ones that's a bit weird is 62% can't name any pieces by Banksy. That doesn't. It's like you can't put that. I mean, Banksy. I'm a big fan. I've actually got a Banksy.
Could you name? Well, you can probably name that one because you've got it.
Yeah.
I couldn't name a Banksy.
Silver Flag. Let's hope it goes up in value because I'm trying to move.
Is it a real one?
It's. I've queued up overnight to get one of this. It was a limited edition.
You bought an NFT. Well done, Josh. Yeah. Anyway, let's see how.
Let's test.
Let's actually test you two right now. We've got some pictures of great artworks coming up on screen now. That's not one of them. That's me. Yes. But they're going to show us. Do you know who that is?
I know that. I don't need.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we say?
Yeah, you got to say it.
Scream. Yeah. Edward Monk. Monk.
Yeah. If that's the right. I would have said Munch, but you know better than me. The next one.
That's the famous. That's. I'll tell you what. It's not. It's not the GB News toilet because they're gender neutral.
No, this is a
This is But I can't remember what.
This is a Weatherspoons in Clapham. No, it's called Fountain by Marcel Duchamp, and we've got one more.
Okay.
Looks possibly a Basquiat.
I think, is this something you drew, Leo?
Is that your bum print from the photocopier or something?
That is. We do need to get a new toner cartridge.
It's an Easter card from...
This is my daughter. My daughter drew this. She didn't do the writing.
Your 6-month-old daughter?
Yeah, my 6-month-old daughter.
Didn't.
She did. Well, she didn't do the writing.
She didn't.
Yeah, she did.
No, she didn't.
Yeah, she did. What, you think a 6-month-old baby couldn't just make a mess on a bit of paper?
Well, it looks a bit like a bunny.
Were you holding her hand?
It does. Yeah, no, she's great. No, I didn't. It was presented to me as a gift by her on a silver cushion. She's very advanced.
Very sweet.
Who needs famous artists when a child?
She can do the baby shark and everything. Anyway, moving on, we've got the Telegraph now with a story that suggests that Britain's fertility crisis could be solved if we just had really big choppers, Kiri.
Crocodile sex frenzy. Triggered by Chinook helicopters. So this is at a Queensland farm in Australia where they found that the rotor blades of a helicopter send crocodiles into. I don't know whether it's just a Chinook helicopter, is what they're saying here.
They're very big. They've got the double rotors and they make that big.
Is that what it is? So like if an Apache helicopter came over, they'd just be like, nah.
Yeah.
Apache does nothing for us.
Wouldn't even get aroused.
Yeah.
Chinook was actually invented by Jimmy Hill.
All right.
Many people know that.
So anyway, they basically found an aphrodisiac for crocodiles. Who would have thought? They're turned on by...
AI write that joke.
What's that?
Sorry, it's a callback.
It's gone now.
Sorry.
Sorry for having some jokes.
Crocodiles are like core helicopter, which we never would have expected would have been part of their evolution. But it's, with all the amazing experiments going on with animals and realizations of how they can work with tools and so on, this one's probably not up there as the best.
Well, no. This is really important because if you're ever caught by a crocodile, just start doing a helicopter.
It's now the best impression.
And then it'll just have sex with you instead. Anyway, moving on, we've got The Guardian now, and a company is in trouble for littering in outer space, Kiri.
Yep, scientists just made a huge leap forward in bringing in... Oh, sorry, no, that's a completely different story, but we can get to this one. I like to surprise you. We've been... the US government has issued the first ever space debris penalty to Dish Network. And now there's thousands of pieces of debris up there that have been going on for ages. I don't know if you remember the tool bag that was dropped in 2009, and it was a lovely moment where an astronaut was working on the International Space Station, and the tool bag wasn't properly tethered. It started floating away, and you see her slowly go to grab it as it leaves. And it was is $100,000 of tool bag, which is one of the most expensive DIY mistakes in history.
That's not
which doesn't make a woman look good. And there was lots of reactions to a woman making a DIY mistake when people forgot that she'd also at the same time managed to become an astronaut and do a spacewalk, which is quite impressive.
Well, finally, in a minute and a half, we've got the Express with some good news for fans of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. We could all be doing a Bush Tucker trial soon, Josh.
Yeah, finally we can cover this story. Brits warned of Paris bedbug outbreak with fears London could be next. And essentially, it's up to 11% of households now. They're also in like cinemas, on trains and whatnot. So this is what it says here. With citizens living in fear, the French government has swiftly mobilised and they've rolled out a series of urgent measures which include showering and bathing and brushing teeth.
That's going to be difficult for French people to follow.
That was a joke.
Yeah. We did start at the beginning of the show talking about what we could do to stop refugees wanting to come to this country and bedbugs, you know? This is a good idea.
This is why they want to come. They want to come to
get away from the
bedbugs. Yeah. But I've had bedbugs, not where I live now, but I lived on Edgware Road. I lived in a flat, and I don't know where they came from. Apparently, they can get from flat to flat.
We had them as well.
They're horrific. You would not believe how horrific. This isn't like mosquitoes or wasps or something. These are massive bugs that live under your mattress. You don't even realise you're being bitten until your girlfriend comes and visits and then comes out in all these purple
but
blotches.
It's the girlfriend, because the bedbug specialist who came in when we had it and said that my girlfriend had got covered in these blotches, and they said they tend to go for women more than men because that's another use for
trans women are safe.
Women are bedbug decoys.
Anyway, the show is nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Times leads with Braverman, migration hurricane is coming. The Telegraph has Sunak, I'll change the status quo. The Guardian has Prime Minister declares politics broken in bid to wrest back control. Daily Mail has What a wig lifter. This was the first properly spellbinding, dramatically assured speech seen at a conference for years, talking about Braverman there. The Metro has It's Justice for Jade. And finally, the Daily Star has Psycho scumbag chatbots aren't all bad. And those were your front pages. And that's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Kerry Marks. Simon Evans will be here tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Thank you and good night.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio, and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. We're live here in Manchester. Today was the big speech of Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary. I'll be joined tonight by Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Nadeem Zahawi. I'm going to ask, will any actions really come from that speech today? And the other big question is there a message that goes out to the country here from Manchester? If there is, I've no idea what it is, but no doubt Sir Ian and Nadeem can make me aware of it because I can't work out what it is. First, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. The top story today is that the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has warned of a future hurricane of mass migration into the UK in her speech to the Tory party conference in Manchester today. Ms Braverman says that as well as stopping illegal migrants from coming to the UK, she'll also make sure that legal migration is held at reasonable levels. GB News presenter Nigel Farage criticised the speech, saying the government was out of touch with ordinary voters. Ms Braverman, though, says the Conservative Party will do whatever it takes to deter the boats.
The Legal Migration Act, which will come into force in the coming months, now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda. But all of this is ultimately a question of political will. And be under no illusion, we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats and deter bogus asylum seekers.
Well, there was a heckler that interrupted the Home Secretary today, but she said later on in the afternoon that he should be forgiven and let back into conference. In these exclusive images obtained by GB News, Andrew Boff, who was led out of the conference, is a Conservative London Assembly member, had to leave the hall after saying the Home Secretary's anti-trans policies amounted to what he called homophobia. Now, the Prime Minister has been telling GB News today he's the person to deliver change to Britain. Rishi Sunak defended his record on illegal migration, saying for the first time ever the number of small boats crossing the English Channel from France is down by a fifth. He also reiterated his plan to halve inflation and accused the Labour leader of being light on policy.
You've got Keir Starmer, who, no one knows what he stands for, flip-flops left and right. The country can see through that. That's not leadership. What I'm offering is different. I know people want change. I'm the person to deliver it because we're going to do politics differently. You saw that on Net Zero. You'll see that this week. That's what you get from a Conservative government.
Well, we're expecting the Prime Minister to confirm in his Conservative Party speech tomorrow in Manchester exactly what his position is on the future of the northern section of the HS2 rail project. Businesses are said to be demanding immediate clarity. Following reports, Rishi Sunak may be planning to scrap the line from Birmingham to Manchester. It's understood the Prime Minister will be announcing spending on other infrastructure projects for the north in his forthcoming speech. And lastly, foreign prisons could be used to help combat the crisis of Britain's overcrowded jails. The government's considering renting prison cells overseas to tackle UK prison overcrowding. Speaking at the Tory party conference, the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, proposed the move, with spare male prisoner capacity in the UK now down to 258 places. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, it was a very highly anticipated speech. Other than Rishi's speech tomorrow, in which we may or may not find out what's happening with HS2, something that has overhung this conference in the most extraordinary and I think terribly mismanaged way. But Suella Braverman's speech was heavily anticipated by the members. Stop the boats has become one of the absolutely key pledges from this government. And Suella Braverman, and I've got to give her credit for one thing, her public speaking style is much, much better than it used to be. She had a certain confidence on the stage this afternoon, and here was her really big line.
The Illegal Migration Act, which will come into force in the coming months, now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda. But all of this is ultimately a question of political will. And be under no illusion, we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats and deter bogus asylum seekers.
So there we are. Be under no illusion. We will do whatever it takes. The trouble is, we heard that from Priti Patel, we heard it from Boris Johnson, we're hearing it, of course, from Rishi Sunak, and now stated very clearly by Suella Braverman. But was there actually any substance in the speech? Was there any real positive message? And the big one that everyone was waiting for was, of course, the ECHR. Yes, the European Convention on Human Rights. I'm joined by GBNews reporter Charlie Peters, who listened to the speech and has been discussing this with Tory close insiders shortly afterwards. How did the faithful take this speech?
Well, it was a very personal speech, I thought. The opening when she said, you know, the winds that took my family to Britain, the winds of migration, have now become a hurricane, really tying back to that personal story. She criticised the Labour Party for saying that they were not doing enough to oppose the dereliction of national sovereignty and the degradation of our borders, which was expected to criticise Labour in that way. What was more interesting, in fact, was that she went on to criticise her own party, saying that too many in the Conservatives were squeamish when it came to dealing with the issue of migration. She also said that many feared being smeared as racist, and that's why they didn't speak up. She said that she would do anything to deal with this problem. And in that discussion on the legalistic issue, she said that the Human Rights Act, she branded it as the Criminal Rights Act, saying that it turbocharged issues whereby bogus asylum claims rattled on for many years and that criminals were not able to be deported. But it wasn't just what she did speak about. As you've mentioned, it was what was omitted from the speech.
Well, that was my feeling too.
The European Convention of Human Rights. Many people speaking to GB News this afternoon saying that they were expecting a comment on that after it was hyped so much in the week ahead of conference. And of course, we've heard about this split in the cabinet between those who are in favour of leaving the convention and those who are more shy, perhaps even squeamish on the issue. Now, allies close to Ms Braverman told me this afternoon that they obviously couldn't make a speech on the ECHR considering the current political storm, and they said that the comments about the Human Rights Act were the next best thing. At the end of the speech, beyond migration, there was also a reference to sex issues and dealing with prisoners. And that's an interesting speech, and many commentators will be interested in how they deal with prisoners changing their gender or changing their name to escape restrictions.
Well, certainly after Scotland, that is a very real political issue. But this is the big one. I mean, frankly, what she said around the Human Rights Act, it's all a bit mealy-mouthed, isn't it? Because the Human Rights Act, of course, was the incorporation of ECHR into British law. Before I go to Sir Ian and get his reaction to this, I was very struck today that she came across, frankly, as a toothless Tory attack puppy. It's all well and good playing up the rhetoric, but we've heard that again and again and again. I didn't see a single solution in this speech to illegal immigration, and she barely touched on it. She barely touched on legal immigration, where the population of this country is exploding, despite the fact we have the Brexit powers to control the numbers. I thought the whole thing was very poor, very disappointing, and it plays in for me to a bigger theme. You see, I can't see a big message coming out of Manchester to the country. I went out earlier and spoke to delegates to ask them, what did they see as the big message? I'm with Richard here, Conservative Party member, man that cares hugely, I think, about the party. Richard, what is the big message out of this conference?
I think it's one of stability. It has been quite disappointing in some ways because I wanted a more radical agenda to be outlined.
Well, the H2, the train's knocked me a little bit because it was going well and now it's been cancelled.
We don't know.
Oh, OK.
We're going to find out in Rishi's speech tomorrow.
I think the party is back, actually. The party, Rishi is the stability.
Rishi's sort of life goal, his 12 months of doing stability is over, and now it's the time to sort of get a bit of grit.
What's the big message? I know. Everybody struggles to answer that.
Rishi Sunak said it was a record attendance. It doesn't seem to be that busy. But I've been to loads of great fringe meetings and CDO meetings.
Yeah, so isn't this the point? The energy has not been in the hall, it's been on the fringe, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
The Conservatives are trying to tell us that they are put together and they've got somewhere going. They're going somewhere in the long run. They're not just here for the short term.
The big message is that people in the country want clarity, they want answers.
Clarity. There's an absence of it. I'm joined by the Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford Green and, of course, former leader of the Conservative Party, Sir Ian Duncan Smith. Did you get the point, Ian, what I was asking the delegates? I mean, maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe you can tell me there is a big standout message coming from this conference to the country. If so, please help me.
Well, I think if they get this right, tomorrow should be the moment when he categorises what he plans to do and hopefully does it in a simple way. I mean, I would simply say, from here until the next election, priority is to get government off people's backs, on their side, give them the freedoms that are necessary, get rid of the woke nonsense, cut taxes, get this economy moving, and get the boats stopped.
OK, now we're told one of the big speeches will be about smoking, that nobody born after 2009 will be able to buy a packet of cigarettes. So I could be, in my mid-70s, going into, the local corner shop, having to produce ID to prove I wasn't born before 2009. The point I'm making is, you say get government off the backs of people. We've had 13 years of government getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Now, listen, we put this in context. We've had the huge COVID attack, which cost us lots of money. We had to spend taxpayers' money, borrow money, and we've had this crisis over Ukraine, which, by the way, you see from this, I think we have to support them. So that has added to the cost burden. I understand all of that. But there are lots of things that we still do and spend money on in the bureaucracy of government that we don't need to do. When I came in, we had to cut quite a lot of the cost of that, and we did so. And I think the government's got to do that to make way for what we consider returning people their money, because we should only spend their money when we absolutely have to. So the key bit about all of this is, and this is where I believe that Rishi Sunak is in the right place himself instinctively, which is, by and large, he is somebody that wants to get the costs down. He set himself a pledge to do that, but he has to articulate that in a way that says, I pledge to you, so we will reduce the burden of taxation before the next election.
But the Chancellor,
get off your back.
But hang on, Ian, the Chancellor, in a 15-minute, somewhat robotic, I thought, performance yesterday.
Very quick, yeah.
Very quick indeed. I mean, there was no hint of taxes being reduced.
The thing is, I don't think they want to make a pledge to cut taxes, but they know that they have to reduce the burden of taxation. It's a fact of life. There's no escaping it. We have the highest tax rate that we've had since the Second World War.
I agree with all of that.
The government knows that.
I agree with all of that.
Well, they've got to get a message shaped around getting off your back.
What I'm hearing,
reducing taxes.
what I'm hearing in Manchester is Suella Braverman, you, telling us what's wrong. And we all know what's wrong.
Yeah.
But you've been in power for 13 years. I mean, do you agree with me that until Rishi's speech, as yet, there is no big standout message?
Yeah, and that's the point about the message tomorrow. It is where we're going to be over the next 10, 12 months. So this speech is the most important speech he will make probably in his life.
Yeah.
Because this hinges where the government goes. And I think what we have to understand also from this speech, if I'm going to be a little bit presumptive, is that I think he needs to let people in. Who is Rishi Sunak? I instinctively think that he is actually much more in the mould of reducing burdens, getting regulations down, and governing less, but giving people more responsibility. I think instinctively in all my conversations with him, that's where he is. He needs to let the public know that this is the guy that's going to try and make this better, easier, and safer for them. The vote stuff is categorical about.
I'm going to come to that.
We'll come back to that.
We'll come because at the end of those Voxes I did, the woman said, clarity.
Agree.
She wants clarity. And this message of stability, I mean, it doesn't impress the general public at all.
No.
We need clarity in America. Now, Suella, who is very much cut in the IDS cloth politically, you know, ardent Brexiteer, free speech advocate, many things that I would find, you know, politically attractive about Suella. And yet she did the same thing again today, didn't she? She told us what was wrong. People won't speak out because they fear being called racist. We've been hearing this stuff for years. Why, oh why, Ian, did she not address the ECHR? Every person in that hall expected this issue to be addressed. She didn't do it.
Well, I'm hoping tomorrow a lot of this is being held back. Because you often know that prime ministers stop cabinet ministers from saying things because they want to say them in a context that develops the key message. So I think I'd be surprised if Rishi Sunak doesn't say something about this. It's one of the big elephants in the room. The truth is, we have a pledge to stop the votes. He made that pledge categorically. I agree that it's got to happen. The only way you're going to stop that is to deter people from making that terribly risky, dangerous route and paying these ghastly traffickers to do it.
Yeah.
To do that, it's got to be the balance of economics versus risk has got to be very clear.
You've got to deport people.
That's the point. So the first flight that leaves with the people on it, that's when the public will go, aha, I get it. This is what's going to happen. So his commitment to do that is already there. The question is, how do you deliver that commitment? Now, we're not alone by any chance. Across Europe, lots of governments are now saying ECHR is a problem.
Oh.
It's not fit for purpose.
I mean, this issue...
Italy is an absolute crisis.
This issue could destroy...
This is not just us.
This could destroy the European Union.
Yep, absolutely.
As an issue. It may destroy the EU before we're brave enough to even act on it.
Well, the key question is, through Brexit, we're out of the European Union, so we have no obligations on that. We have to make the decisions for ourselves.
Should we leave the ECHR?
Well, there are lots of mechanisms about leaving which aren't also incomplete leaving. So, for example, you've got the legislation that Tony Blair brought through, which gives direct application to the courts. That's one of the areas you could immediately look
our
at.
Judges
stop direct application.
Our judges will always go back to ECHR.
Yeah, but they can't if they're not got direct application. That's
why not just make it simple?
Well, there's one. No,
clarity. Clarity. Why not just leave it?
You could leave it, and you could rejoin tomorrow, knocking out all the areas that you don't like, because everybody else did that.
Fine.
France did.
So
there's lots of ways of doing it.
Isn't the truth of it that your parliamentary party overwhelmingly want to stay part of it?
Well, I understand human rights is very important, and we want to uphold human rights. We were the first to do it. We still have a proud record of doing it. But we need to get the difference between human rights, saving people who are being persecuted, being trafficked, etc. That's laudable, that's right. But we also have a responsibility to get control of what is a migration system being abused by the traffickers. That means we have to take the action that's necessary. There's 3 or 4 ways of doing it. But I hope tomorrow he will be clear.
Well,
if this gets overturned,
we'll wait and see.
There is stage 2 to go to, and we will take that stage.
We'll wait and see.
He has to be clear about that.
We'll wait and see. But I thought, for Suella, given the whole pitch, given the whole political image that she gives, not to even talk about. She could have hinted, couldn't she? You'll hear more tomorrow. Didn't mention it. Very disappointing.
Well, there's an old Teddy Roosevelt had a line which I've always think is important: speak softly, but carry a big stick. And the big stick tomorrow has to be where he was.
Well, we'll wait and see. Now, here we are. Party management. Never easy. You're a former party leader. I am of a smaller party. Things often go wrong at conferences. We know about all that. How can we be in Manchester, of all the cities in the UK, and we have a string of cabinet ministers, the Prime Minister, refusing to answer the question whether the extension from Birmingham to Manchester of HS2 is going ahead. This is actually clouding out the potential of any other clear messages getting through. Isn't this a complete mess?
I think there was a mistake earlier on, and somehow there was some suggestion, whether it came out deliberately or not, I don't know, from Downing Street, that this was being discussed and looked at. Yeah. It was always going to then, as we're going to Manchester, going to be the big issue that's running through it.
A leak, possibly?
I think more likely the leak, because I know if I know the Prime Minister at all, I know he likes to get this closed and sorted, then make announcements, so he won't have liked that at all. And that has, you're right, it has dominated. But I think the real issue here, I mean, I'm one of those that never thought that you would build up the north by umbilically linking it again to London.
Yeah.
What is necessary, and here's where I hope the government will go, is to say to those northern great cities, we want you to develop as an alternative to London in many ways. And to do that, we need to invest money, more money than's going to road, rail, communications, etc. And the way to do that is if we have to stop the link, HS2, at Birmingham or wherever it happens to be, a proportion of that money that we save, significant proportion, will go to you guys to make this northern powerhouse work.
And to link up Leeds, and Liverpool, and Hull, and all of it,
all the
actually.
big cities, make them together
well,
the powerhouse that competes with London and
maybe
becomes a destination. Now that
I would agree with that.
Would work, and I think many of the mayors would run with that too.
Are we going to hear that?
Well, I hope so. You know, I don't.
I bet we don't.
I'm not in.
I bet we don't.
Well, he may not make. People are saying he's going to make an announcement about the HS2. I'd be surprised if he makes it tomorrow.
Well, I tell you what, if they walk away from here having not answered the HS2 question, then the whole conference will be a failure. Quick final thought. Any hope of winning the next election?
Yeah, I actually, you know, you talked about the Vox Pop. I've been doing a lot of talking to people, and the mood I'm getting out of this conference is more up than I had expected it to be. And I think one of the reasons is because Rishi Sunak's had to be very cautious and get the inflation down, all the rest. All those targets are important. But a week and a half ago, he took a big decision over the net zero.
And it worked.
And he said, I'm going to lift this from 2030 to 2035, gas and all everything is, get that back, because I'm not going to have you beaten in cost terms all the way to net zero. It's too difficult at the moment. It's too expensive. We'll do it in a pace that suits you. That was a very big moment, because there'll be a lot of people around him saying, oh, don't do this.
Yeah.
It did two things. It begins to define who he really is. And to my point earlier on, Rishi is by and large skeptic about the idea that you can tax and spend your way out of difficulty. So this is very important. The second bit of it is it brought Labour to the fight. They said, we'll reverse it.
Yeah.
That means now we are on ground that the Tories should be
clear blue water.
So this is the point. So I have a real instinct about Rishi.
All right, let's see.
This is where he instinctively lies.
Let's see.
And he will deliver on it at some point.
I have to say, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, it's marvellous. After 30 years in Parliament, you still exude optimism for the next election. I think it's rather wonderful. In a moment, a special exclusive report from Lampedusa, the implications of which will play out in the English Channel very, very shortly. Back with you in 2 minutes.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Suella Braverman talked about a hurricane of migration, in particular coming from North Africa, and nowhere has been more acutely affected over the last couple of weeks than the Italian island of Lampedusa. GB News' Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White, has been to Lampedusa and produced for us this exclusive report.
A week after more than 11,000 migrants arrived on this tiny Italian island, we watched as the final batch of 101, mainly young men from sub-Saharan Africa, left to board a ferry to the Italian mainland. Authorities here took advantage of several days of bad weather in the Med to clear the decks ahead of the next surge of migrant arrivals. It is a seemingly never-ending cycle in the mass movement of people across this sea. Lampedusa's geographical location, closer to North Africa than Italy, puts it on the front line of Europe's growing migrant crisis. But many of the 6,000 residents here say they feel forgotten, overwhelmed by the constant arrivals, with little concrete action from Europe's politicians. The Italian Red Cross run the main migrant reception centre on Lampedusa. They've been drafting in additional support to deal with the next surge in arrivals. The chaos of the last surge still fresh in their minds, where at one point 7,000 people were crammed into this compound, many clashing with police as they tried to leave. Serena Cornelia said the volunteers here felt powerless to help.
More difficult to give the support, but we try to give food, give kit, give psychological support and health support. So we have tried to take care of all the people inside the center.
There are real concerns here on Lampedusa that the tourist trade, the lifeblood of this island community, could begin to dry up if a solution isn't found to the crisis. You don't have to look far for evidence of its impact here. Near the entrance to the port, a migrant boat lies beached on the rocks, a gaping hole in its hull. The personal belongings of its human cargo hanging over the sides. Inside the harbour, dozens of other migrant boats that made it here in recent days lie tied up, awaiting removal. Many still full of tire inner tubes, used by the migrants as makeshift life jackets. Further along the quayside, fishermen unload the last of their catch for local restaurants. The winds that have kept the migrant boats away for several days have also forced these fishermen back to port. Giacomo Migno says the migrant boats are severely impacting their livelihood.
So when we encounter a migrant boat, we call the authorities. They tell us to wait, not to do anything. Then the Coast Guard arrives, or the police patrol. But it means we're financially ruined. It's a mess. Our work is badly affected. It's too much.
Unlike the vast majority of African migrants who want to head to mainland Europe, Talla Diouf has made a life for himself here. The Senegalese national says the huge flow of fellow migrants onto this island is simply unsustainable.
The government must find a solution as quickly as possible because the island has 6,300 inhabitants. Then, if 11,000 of my brothers come, it's a big problem. We have to find a solution quickly because nothing will be done until next summer.
For now, these migrants are headed for the mainland. But this is not just an Italian problem. It's a Europe-wide crisis. Many here will eventually head north, some to the coast of northwest France and onto another boat, this time across the English Channel. Mark White, GB News on Lampedusa.
Well, it's a very powerful, but I would suggest quite disturbing package. You can call it a hurricane, you can call it an invasion. It's happening. The EU have put in place their own asylum policy, which basically says if you cross the Med, set foot on the EU soil, you can stay. And equally, we are still paying the price for that. The German president last week said we are at breaking point with this, saying that Germany simply can't take any more. Italy desperate to get the rest of the EU to help. And into this row, Elon Musk says, why are German subsidized non-governmental organization boats in the Mediterranean effectively helping, ferrying, taxiing migrants into Lampedusa, whilst at the same time Germany doesn't want any more? It is a complete political and social disaster. That report, what is going on in Lampedusa, is what's happening in the English Channel, but on a much, much bigger, and I think a much more disturbing scale. The point about Brexit, for me, was we would free ourselves from EU stupidity, and yet through our lack of courage, we simply haven't done so. In a moment, I'll talk about Donald Trump in court yesterday, and why the charges against him are clearly, totally, and utterly fraudulent.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the What the Farage moment today, and this is extraordinary. Donald Trump is back in court. Nothing new there, I hear you say. He's being accused by New York prosecutors of playing up the value of his real estate to borrow big money from banks off the back of it and to make $100 million profit in the process. Now, to be clear, all the money that he borrowed from his banks has been paid back in full. But here's the farce of it. Far from overvaluing his properties by between $1 and $2 billion, the judge has valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million. Believe me, I've been there many, many times. I was out last night with a real estate guy who said he'd pay $500 million for it. It is the best piece of real estate on the whole east coast of America and would probably sell for in excess of $1 billion. And this shows you how utterly corrupt, completely bent the US judicial system has been in its desperate attempt to do down Donald Trump. This is a total, complete fraud. Now, on to a better story. This is about Tesco's in Waltham Abbey. It's about shoplifters running rampant, running riot, nicking 3,000 quid's worth of goods. And yet, a group called TMI, a group of private investigators, former cops, actually managed to catch people in the act. And are they dangerous vigilantes, these people? You can see them storming the car. Are they dangerous vigilantes acting outside the law? Or is this what we need to do to reverse this horrendous wave of lawlessness and shoplifting? Well, I'm very pleased to be joined by David McKelvey. David, it's an amazing story, but you guys, as civilians, storming a car, it's potentially quite dangerous, isn't it?
It is dangerous, and the people in the car were extremely violent, and had to be subdued and had to be handcuffed. I mean, unfortunately for them, the team, the prolific crimes team, who go out on a daily basis and catch shoplifters and we prosecute them, were on a training day for handcuff training. And so they were sitting just on the break. They were sitting down having their lunch when these people, openly looted the Tesco store in front of them. And obviously, at that stage, we couldn't just stand by and watch this take place. So we intervened.
Right, but David, you were prepared for this, yeah? You've been looking out for this.
No. No, we don't operate in Waltham Abbey. It's not one of the areas we operate. We operate across many other areas, but not Waltham Abbey. It was a training day. We were doing handcuff training, and literally this unfolded in front of the chaps as they were having their lunch.
David, well done you, very successful. Do you believe there is a way we can stop this shoplifting wave, which is now almost endemic in many of the big stores and even small shops in our country?
Absolutely, and we have proved it over the past 2 years in every single area that we police, that we have detectives and we have our bobbies. You have seen significant reductions in crime and particularly retail crime, significant reductions. And it's only about old-fashioned core policing. It's about having people there on the street, people who attend, deal with the incidents, gather the evidence, and then the one thing we do and nobody else does is we prosecute those people in the criminal courts.
And that's the key, isn't it? Prosecution is now the key.
It's the only thing, Nigel, that works. You can invest in CCTV, body-worn cameras, you can do everything. The only thing that makes any difference is putting these people before a court and convicting them and ensuring that the court gives them the appropriate sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David McKelvey, great story. Please keep up the good work. There we are, a positive message. Something can be done. Now, I wonder whether there are positive messages coming out of Manchester. There are certainly no big messages that I've been able to detect. Maybe we'll get one tomorrow from Rishi Sunak. I somehow doubt it. But what are Joe Public saying? James Johnson, number 10 pollster for Theresa May, and of course, JL Partners. James, Two things, really. Secondly, the immigration polling in the Sunday Times this week, really, really interesting. But first, I did some Voxes earlier, and the last woman I spoke to said, we want clarity. Is there any in the minds of voters?
There's not. I mean, the number one word that they associate most with the Conservative Party at the moment is useless. It's not just, you usually get something like, rich, corrupt, nasty, but it's not even that. You can be sort of nasty and effective and still get elected, but you can't be nasty and useless. And that's the problem for the Conservative Party at the moment. Now, and that's what Rishi Sunak will be hoping to change tomorrow. And, he's got some time. He's still got 12 months or so till the next election, but clarity is the absolute key. That's what voters are asking for. They don't just want, they don't want Rishi Sunak to be their best friend. They don't think he's going to be in touch with them. There's no point Rishi Sunak trying to do that.
Nice bloke, clever, decent, but that's not good enough.
They're not going to think he's, their best mate, and he shouldn't try and do that. He's got to be strong and the guy with a plan and the guy who's, going to level with them and give the tough decisions. If he can do that with some standout policies tomorrow, he might be able to turn it around. But there's no doubt he's really not anywhere on their radar for that at the moment.
No, and the HS2 thing, of course, just shows indecision and muddle. We'll find out more. To me, James, one of the big elephants in the room at this conference has been legal immigration. There's Suella, banging the drum. We're going to stop the boats, and we've heard it all before. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But it's legal immigration, isn't it? It's the rapidly rising population. It's the impact on housing, on schools, on GP appointments. You produced some polling last week on this that was extraordinary, off the back of some of the words Suella had said.
Yeah, so what we did, I'll bring it up so I can cite it properly. I mean, what we did is we polled a number of extracts from the speech, because when it came out, I think you might remember, the commentariat and a lot of people on Twitter said, this is horrifying.
She said mass immigration, mass illegal immigration, posed an existential crisis for the West.
She did, and the public agree with it. 66% of the public agree with that statement. The most agreed of any of the statements that we polled, only 11% disagreed.
So 66% agreed with her, 11% disagreed, and yet in Westminster, and amongst the mainstream media, those numbers are reversed.
It's a different world. It's a different world, and I think this is one of the the real challenges for the Conservative Party at the moment, is that they'll say these things and they'll get jumped on by the press and mauled, but actually it could also be quite good for them, because it means all these things are getting a lot of attention, and to most people sat at home, these feel like statements of the obvious that Suella Braverman's making. Causes a huge hullabaloo on Twitter, but actually resonates with them a lot. And we asked also, multiculturalism has failed, agree or disagree. More people agree with that than disagreed. All the other lines in the speech, not one of them was disagreed with. So it is a different world between Westminster and the public on this issue.
And yet the Tory party here in Manchester not really picking up on any of this.
So I think Suella Braverman probably is, and I imagine Rishi Sunak actually is more likely to think that. I think one of the things that one of Rishi Sunak's senior members of the staff said to me yesterday was, Rishi Sunak cannot understand, coming from a family of legal immigrants, why you should be able to do this. The problem for the Conservatives is they now need to put those words into action. And the small votes numbers are going to be absolutely key in determining the next election.
James Johnson confirming there what you know at home, which is that Westminster may as well be a completely foreign country. They're miles away. James, thank you. In a moment, I'm going to speak to Nadeem Sahawi. Going to ask him, can the Tories really fight back and win the next election?
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I am joined by the Conservative Member of Parliament for Stratford-on-Avon, and of course he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, Chairman of the Conservative Party, an entrepreneur. We might even call you, Nadeem Zahawi, a self-made man, an aspirant.
Bless you.
We were chatting in the break, before we came on, that you joined this party back in the 80s, when it was all about aspiration, wasn't it? It didn't matter what your religion was, what your race was, what your class was. You know, Mrs. Thatcher believed if you had the ability, you worked hard, had a bit of luck, you could do well. You did do rather well, didn't you?
Very much so. I was very lucky and blessed. I remember my mum saying, you know, son, the country that's adopted us has got a grocer's daughter as Prime Minister.
Yeah, because you come from Iraq, haven't you?
Right. Absolutely right. Yeah, no, it's remarkable. Actually, in many ways, if you reflect on that and you look at the cabinet today, okay, some of them weren't born when the great lady was Prime Minister, but you look, you know, James Cleverly, Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, even Rishi Sunak himself, right? It is a product of that era of, if you're aspirational, if you work hard, you're going to do well in this country.
Yeah, but Rishi Sunak went to Winchester College and I went to Oxford, and I mean, you know,
I hear you.
I mean, you know, you didn't have those privileges.
No, but
is this party today about aspiration? Is it about small business? Is it about enterprise? Because I can't see it.
So I tell you what I think it's about, and I think Rishi is beginning to cut through on this, that he will make the difficult decisions, long-term decisions, that people will see that he's on their side. I don't think people care what your background is. What they care about is, are you on their side? You know, in their moments of challenge and need, he's on their side. You look at what he did on furlough, right? You look at what he did actually on gas assets in the North Sea. Right. You look at what he did on net zero.
Hang on a second. I mean, we're still taxing gas and oil companies 75%.
But he went up against huge opposition from Labour and others and said, actually, these assets are important to us. Instead of us having to import more gas from abroad, right, we're going to explore our own
not
gas.
Before time, and I grant you that.
Net zero.
I grant you that.
Right. We'll still deliver by 2050, but we don't do things that are going to hurt hard-pressed people in the short term for a soundbite.
Those things make sense to me, and that they were pragmatic changes.
100%.
The targets on petrol and diesel cars were completely unachievable. It was pragmatic. But here's my thing. Going around today, and I've been here a couple of days now, 3 days, met a lot of people, and I keep asking people, what's the big message from this conference? Now, I grant you, it might come tomorrow from the Prime Minister, but at the moment, there isn't one, is there?
I disagree. I think what he's really trying to get across is, look, it's not about a soundbite. It's not about, Starmer just sort of really swaying in the wind, whichever way it blows. Flip-flopping. It's about, I will be honest with you. I'll tell you what I think works, and I'm going to deliver against it. Right? And he's beginning to, you look at what's happening, his whole stall was to say, we've got to halve inflation, right? We've got to deal with my 5 promises, grow the economy.
Stop the boats. Not much chance of that.
No, it's hard. I was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster in the Cabinet Office as we was working with Suella. Right? It's hard, but it's beginning to work. Look at what we did with the Albanians. The moment the message got across that you'll be out of here in 24 hours if you come illegally, right? The numbers drop.
Yeah, but
the moment we get those planes off to
loads have come and stayed already, and many have got involved in running drugs gangs in our big cities. I mean, it's not been good.
Well, look, you're right. It's been a difficult one, and it is probably one of the toughest things to deal with. Why? Because we now are in a world where the legislation of old, post Second World War, no longer applies.
So should we just... I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
We understand why the ECHR was set up. We understand British lawyers, and Churchill was very for it, and it was to stop the abuses against the Jews and others. But isn't it time we just left it?
I would much rather see us reform. Why? As I travel around the world, this is a problem for pretty much every major economy in the world. The problem, and the Home Secretary dealt with it today, is that we're in a world now of mass migration, mass movement of humanity, right? So it's a problem for all of us. We have to begin to think about why is it that we can reform our own legislation to modernize it, right, as needs be, but we can't touch this. I think reform is what it's about.
I think that's exactly what Labour will say next week.
No, they won't.
You see, no, pretty much they will. See, here's the point, Nadeem Zahawi. Most people who vote are busy people. They've got jobs, mortgages, a Labrador, 2.3 kids. They're busy living their lives. And you look back on the great political leaders. Thatcher was one. The ladies not for turning. We knew she was going to stick with where we were, tough though it was. Blair, education. These big, standout, clear messages. We knew. I mean, and they're the 2 great leaders I think we've seen in our lifetimes. But to tell me that Rishi is going to give us good long-term management because he's an intelligent, good chap. People want really clear messages. To say you're going to reform the ECHR, no one believes it.
Well, nothing's off the table for this government.
No.
He will stop the boats. I'm confident he'll manage to do that. He will make sure the economy grows. You're seeing Rishi Sunak at his best when he says, listen, of course I've got to deliver net zero by 2050, but I'm not going to do it by lying to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. We don't have the charging infrastructure.
So
we don't have the
more
grid,
of that.
Right? More of Rishi behaving like an engineer would, i.e. focusing on outcomes. Let me deliver for you and show you. I think that will play well.
Interesting. So do you think there's a possibility of a 92-style shock at the general election?
Absolutely do.
You do?
100%. I'll tell you why, right? And I ran a polling organisation.
YouGov, right. Absolutely.
So if you look at all the research, there isn't a single policy that the voters identify with Keir Starmer and are for it. They're just annoyed with us, right? We've had a difficult time.
They think you're useless.
Right. And we've had a tough year, right? No doubt about that. And there's no point flanneling your viewers and telling them, no, it's all fine, everything is good. It's not. But Keir Starmer is no Tony Blair. What will happen, I think,
that is true.
What will happen is people will start seeing, actually, this guy Rishi, he says stuff that is not always comfortable, but at least tells me the truth, and then he fixes stuff. And I think that will bode well.
And what happens to Nadeem Zahawi? The guy that was the entrepreneur, that became the great success, that rose to big offices, that had a crack at the main job, had a few problems along the way, a few ups and downs, a little bit of financial issues here and there. What do you do next?
Secretary of State for Stratford-on-Avon. When I was selected in 2010, I said to them, my ambition is to be your Secretary of State, to be your champion in Parliament. I'm patron of the Adam Smith Institute, fighting for smaller government, better outcomes, a dynamic economy.
So you're a campaigner?
I'm a campaigner. I've got a campaign that I've been running for the last 6 months. When the time is right, I want to see Rishi and Jeremy Hunt abolish inheritance tax. It is an unfair
That's your latest
tax.
big campaign.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, well, I tell you what, a lot of GB viewers will agree with that. Nadeem, thank you.
Yes, you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Now, very odd today, wasn't it? I mean, there was speculation, would I even be allowed inside the building? Even though I was working for GB News, would the Tories be so hostile to me because they resent me for, UKIP and putting candidates up against them in the past? And wow, I've been so welcomed here that actually the Prime Minister didn't say no, that whether I could join the party or not. Now, I've got to tell you folks at home, I've no intention of joining the party at this stage. It would need to reform radically, but do you think they'd have me?
Why not? If you come and join us...
Hesitancy there.
Not at all. If you come and join us on this journey of speaking truth to power,
all right, well,
saying to people that look, these are things we need to fix.
Well, let's see what the Jacob Rees-Mogg has to say to that. Jacob, good evening. Would the party really have me?
My Lord Farage, I think the party should welcome you in with open arms, ideally with a peerage, and actually I think it's your duty to join the party. You can help us. You can help us ensure that we get the best possible Brexit and that we deal with the migration crisis and that we cut taxes. Nigel, you are a proper Tory. You should come home.
Oh, I love it. They're all so wonderfully optimistic, this mob. They really are. It's all too much. Let's get the weather.
Hello again, I'm Alex Burkill and here's your latest GB News weather bulletin. We have some pretty wet weather to come across northern parts through the next 24 hours, but further south it is a drier picture, and that's because of this area of high pressure that's going to build and lead to a quieter spell as we go through the rest of the week for southern areas. Further north and tightly packed isobars show that it's blustery, and we have a weather system that's going to push in as we go through tonight and into Wednesday. Some heavy rain affecting particularly western parts of Scotland through the next 24 hours or so, but even some of that spreading further eastwards. We are going to see increasing amounts of cloud across parts of England and Wales, but in the east, where we have some clear skies, rural spots could just about dip into single figures. As we go through Wednesday then, a north-south split, quite cloudy and wet across many northern areas, particularly western, southwestern parts of Scotland. Here, rainfall totals could build up. There could be a little bit of localised flooding and also some disruption to travel. Further north across Scotland, it's going to be a showery day and also a few showers across parts of England and Wales, but also some bright sunny spells, and with winds a little bit lighter than they have been recently and temperatures getting to highs around 19-20, it should feel relatively warm. As we go through Thursday then, staying largely dry across more southeastern parts of the UK, but notice some wet weather that will push in across parts of Northern Ireland, into Wales, Northern England, and also across...
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson.
It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. It's been a busy conference day here, but before anything else, we'll be debating how we restore conservatism and prosperity in this, our great nation. And of course, conservatism and prosperity go hand in glove. But at a time like this, at a Tory party conference with a general election next year, we owe it to voters to remind them what it means to be a Tory and what it takes to restore full-blooded conservatism. Well, speaking of conservatism, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, addressed the conference today and announced the following.
I know as Conservatives, we know what a woman is. And I know the vast majority of NHS staff and patients do too.
Gender-neutral language is set to be removed from the NHS constitution, and female-only wards will be for women only. Some bold announcements from Mr Barclay, but will it cut the mustard? The doctors are on strike yet again for a debilitating 72 hours. In fact, they've even set up shop just a few short yards from here. There was even someone dressed as a badger, protesting against, I can only assume, badger culling. But while the display is laughable, the consequences are dire for the British public. Hundreds of thousands of appointments have already been cancelled, and many more will be cancelled in addition. Plus, how do you have your steak? Medium rare, well done, or hormone-treated? Well, a remark about hormone-treated Australian beef seems to have upset the protectionist racket of the National Farmers Union, and it's been suggested I ought to be deported. State of the Nation starts now. Defiantly holding the State of the Nation flabellum tonight is the irascible journalist, author and broadcaster Michael Crick. As always, I want to hear from you. It's a crucial part of the programme. Email me, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's what you've been waiting for, the news of the day with Polly Middlehurst.
Jacob, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story tonight, the Home Secretary has warned of a future hurricane of mass migration into the UK in her speech at the Tory party conference in Manchester today. Suella Braverman said that as well as stopping illegal migrants from coming to the UK, she promises to make sure that legal migration is held at reasonable levels. GB News presenter Nigel Farage criticised the speech, though, saying the government was out of touch with ordinary voters. But Miss Braverman said the Conservative Party will do whatever it takes to deter the boats.
The Illegal Migration Act, which will come into force in the coming months, now means that the only route to asylum in the UK is a legal route. The Act means that those arriving illegally will be detained and removed back to their home country if possible, or to a safe third country like Rwanda. But all of this is ultimately a question of political will. And be under no illusion, we will do whatever it takes to stop the boats and deter bogus asylum seekers.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has told GB News today he's the person to deliver change to Britain. Rishi Sunak defended his record on illegal migration, saying for the first time ever the number of small boats crossing the English Channel from France was down by a fifth. He also reiterated his plan to halve inflation and accused the Labour leader of being light on policy.
You've got Keir Starmer, who, no one knows what he stands for, flip-flops left and right. The country can see through that. That's not leadership. What I'm offering is different. I know people want change. I'm the person to deliver it because we're going to do politics differently. You saw that on net zero. You'll see that this week. That's what you get from a Conservative government.
Well, the Prime Minister's expected to confirm in his Conservative Party speech tomorrow exactly what his position is on the future of the northern section of the HS2 rail project. Businesses are said to be demanding immediate clarity following reports Rishi Sunak may be planning to scrap the line from Birmingham to Manchester. It's understood the Prime Minister will announce spending on other infrastructure projects for the north in his forthcoming speech tomorrow. Now, some news reaching us in the last hour. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been dismissive of disaster the UK COVID-19 inquiry's been hearing. The Bereaved Families for Justice group says there was a leadership void in the early days of the crisis, and they went on to accuse Mr Johnson of cavalier public messaging just weeks before the lockdown. The inquiry also heard that key WhatsApp messages by the then Prime Minister are unrecoverable. The Prince and Princess of Wales have been in Cardiff today in Wales to meet members of the Windrush generation. Prince William and Princess Catherine greeted Windrush veterans and descendants during their visit, marking the start of Black History Month. They met with Windrush organisations at the Grange Pavilion Community Centre to hear about their contribution to the Welsh community. And the couple, notoriously competitive as they are, joined members of the Youth Forum for a quick game of table tennis as well. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Today, earlier on, we were discussing at the Legatum Institute what it means to be a Conservative and how, as a Conservative, you should restore prosperity. And it's basically about going back to first principles. Conservatives believe in the individual as opposed to the collective. That is to say, the idea that power, authority, prosperity comes from the actions of individuals coming together and doing things through their family, then through a community, then to the state, creating an overall society. This is in contradistinction to the socialist who believes that the collective is what you should worry about and that the collective as a whole can have the individual fit in with what it sees as being best for the collective. Now, we have built up a constitution, to my mind, based on conservative principles of freedom. You see them in the Magna Carta. You see them in the 1297 Act of Tallage. You see them in the Bill of Rights, that we are a society that has put the state under the law rather than having the state as above the law, which is very much more the constitutional model on the continent. So, John Fortescue in the 15th century was able to say that the King of England was under the law, whereas the King of France was the law. And you see this in later centuries with Louis XIV able to say, the state is me. And you continue to see it in our different constitution practices today. What are the pillars of our constitution? Well, they're fourfold. They are democracy, and a democracy of great antiquity. The right of Parliament to vote on taxation dates back to 1297. The rule of law. That's not the same as the rule of lawyers, but it is the common law and the law passed by Parliament. The rights of property. Your property can only be taken from you by a proper process, and taxation, which is confiscation of property, again requires Parliament. And the freedom of speech, obviously including the freedom of the press. This is so fundamentally important because it is the freedom of speech that exposes corruption and abuses, and you need that to make democracy work, because if you don't know what's going on, how can you vote about it? And this is tied in with the conservative belief that society is built up from the individual. And it makes a more prosperous society because the individual spends his or her money better than the state can spend it for him. Why do I say that? Well, when you spend your money, you decide what's the interest of you and your family. When the state does it, it has to go through a whole complex process to ensure that it isn't being spent improperly. And that creates massive inefficiencies, and it's spent not necessarily for good investment reasons, but for political reasons. And the state is competitive with the individual and competitive with that first building block, the family. The state has always worried that the family is something that is as strong as it is, and therefore looks to control it, particularly the socialist state. That has always been the worry for those of us who think that the individual counts and that we need strong families as well. So that's what we were talking about this morning at Lagarde, and we were talking about how you create this prosperous state built on individuals working for themselves and for their families, the Adam Smith view that the baker doesn't bake bread out of the goodness of his heart, but to make money, but that the bread he sells makes you better off, more comfortable, feeds you, feeds your family, and that these basic principles are what this conference needs to make us an even more successful nation, and to have a clear distinction between us and the controlling, overriding, bossy, nannying socialist. As always, I want to hear from you. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts. You know the email off by heart by now. It's mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm very pleased to be joined now by the great flabellum holder, the journalist and author, Michael Crick. Michael, do you accept that prosperity comes more from conservative principles based on the individual than it does from socialist principles?
No, I don't necessarily. And I think that actually this distinction you make between the socialists believing in the collective and conservatives being in the individual is incredibly, well, it's just not an accurate picture. I mean, the Second World War was a collective effort by this country to defeat the Nazis, a very successful one, an example of how the collective can often work much better than the sums of individuals. If we were to say, okay, well, we're going to get rid of schools in this country, and from now on, all parents have to find a way of educating their children for themselves, it would be chaotic. People would be badly educated. Some people would be well educated. People like yourself, no doubt, could afford an army of tutors, but most of the population couldn't. So Conservatives have accepted the collective in all sorts of areas of life: the health service, education, defence, the police, and it is, you know, some of those to which you really held dear, defence and the police.
But what I was actually saying was that society is built up. This back to Margaret Thatcher's comment. There's no such thing as society. There are individuals and their families. It's how is society constructed? Is it built bottom up, and that individuals come together and they cooperate and they create family, community, and state? Or is it the state that is authoritative and then directs downwards? And
well, I would agree that ideally it should come from the bottom up, but occasionally the state has to intervene and said, hang on a moment, we can't wait for it to build from the bottom up. We've got to take action here. I mean, for instance, the state, something I believe strongly in and you don't, taking firm action on net zero, 2050, passing new laws and all of that. We couldn't wait for individuals to say, this is quite a good idea.
Here I completely disagree with you.
Yes.
That I think if we are to get to net zero, it has to be done in a way that individuals buy into it rather than penalised and bullied.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the state has got to persuade people to go along in the same way that the state,
got to be competitive and affordable.
The state persuaded people that they ought to send their children to school. And there's not many, actually, it's probably more now than there have been for a very long time, but over the 150 years or so of compulsory state education, everybody's gone along with that, partly because it's personally convenient to them.
People wanted to send their children to school.
Exactly.
And that schools built up, and there were voluntary schools before the state then made it something it encouraged and paid for, and then something that was compulsory. But if you take the lockdown, which was the top-down state that stopped children going to school, that has very bad and damaging effects.
Well,
and children are not going back.
It was decided during lockdown that COVID was so dangerous, and indeed thousands of people were dying every day at one point, that the state had to take strong action, curtail people's liberties. Now, I happen to believe, and you certainly believe, that it went too far. But that's only in my case, in hindsight, and I now realise. But I mean, it could have been, it could have been a lot worse. We didn't know at the time how bad it was going to be.
I thought
and it was Conservatives, after all, who made these decisions.
It was. Not all Conservative decisions are right.
And indeed, your hero, Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister.
Even Homer nods. But if you take the final winter of COVID, the winter 2020-21, when there wasn't a lockdown, people of their own volition cancelled their Christmas parties and so on. And I think you can trust people to do things for themselves much better than this top-down approach, which had terrible consequences, and that we should learn from that. And actually, the Labour Party is always keen to control people in every area. It's what it exists to do.
Well, I think that's a caricature of the modern Labour Party. It may have been truer in 1945, when, after all, we'd just come through the greatest collective effort we'd ever seen under a Conservative Prime Minister, not a Conservative government, of course, and that was the mood of the times, and it was very successful in the Attlee government.
You get a bit romantic about the collective effort. I'd be a bit, because wasn't 1941 the highest year of strikes in the mines in our history?
That is true, actually, I think, yes. Yeah. But things have moved on, and I don't think the modern Labour Party is especially collective anymore. In fact, some people would argue they wish it was.
Talking of modern parties...
But yes, go on.
Do you think people who heckle at political events should be thrown out of the
I certainly
arena?
don't. And Andrew Boff, you're talking about...
Andrew Boff, can we?
Yes.
I think we can, being thrown out. Or perhaps we can't. No, we can't apparently show him being thrown out.
And actually, I think there's a growing intolerance about your party right now, because you saw that today. I mean, after all, what did he say? That there is no such thing as trans ideology in response to Suella Braverman.
They did it to some old man who heckled Tony Blair and arrested him on anti-terrorism charges. And that this is always a mistake. That you should be really calm about heckling.
And actually, heckling has always been a good part of politics. You must have been heckled and enjoyed it.
You've
probably heckled yourself occasionally. Michael Heseltine used to get his mates to heckle him deliberately at the back without pointing out they were his mates, but he said, don't tell me what you're going to heckle me, because it'll make me look good.
Yeah, heckling really helps.
And there was another incident yesterday with Steve Bray, you know, the guy with the blue hat, the pro-Remainer.
Only too well.
Right, he was manhandled out of the Bruges group for asking a question along the lines of, so what are the benefits of Brexit then? Where are they? Perfectly legitimate question. Even the Bruges group should have been able to answer that. So I do think there is a bit of an intolerance about it at the moment. And you see it also with Priti Patel. You know, you said that freedom of the press was important. You know, Priti Patel making a speech, attacking the BBC, talking about fake news in the BBC. This is Trump language. Now, I know you were a supporter of Trump at one point. I'm not sure whether you still are. But I think that one of the aspects of the modern Conservative Party, which is very non-conservative, really, there is a lack of generosity, a lack of kindness, a lack of compassion, Christian values, if you like, and of course, Christianity was an important component of your party's philosophy.
I haven't seen what Priti has called fake news. But all newscasters sometimes make mistakes. So
but fake news implies it's deliberate, that you've actually, you know it's fake. We've made mistakes. You must have made mistakes. You come from a newspaper family yourself. Yeah, but that's not fake news. Fake news is where you deliberately put out something out there you know to be wrong, probably for political purposes. Now, I think if you were trying to find examples of the BBC doing that, I think you'd really struggle. And for the former Home Secretary to come out with remarks like that is an intolerant, and actually it's undermining one of our great institutions. As a Conservative, I would have thought you would be a believer in the BBC. But do you want to bring it down? And
I think the BBC should be privatised and the licensing is unjustifiable. But unfortunately, we've got to move on before having that discussion. Thank you, Michael. Don't forget to let me know what you think. mailmorg@gbnews.com. After the messages from our generous sponsors, I'll be asking why the NHS has been trying to counsel women. Plus, do you like your beef hormone-treated yum-yum?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is State of the Nation. You've been getting in touch with your thoughts, which I have electronically for you today via the miracle of WhatsApp. Philip says, "Hi, Sir Jacob. If Steve Barclay is serious, capital S, about stopping woke and gender ideology, the NHS needs to stop employing diversity and gender/woke employees. It wastes time making red tape and costing billions. People go to the NHS to be treated, not to be preached at." Well, I worked very closely with Steve Barclay in one of my ministerial roles, and he is one of the most serious and effective ministers in the government. John asks, JRM, has working on GB News given you a better insight and understanding of how the public views the current Conservative Party? To which the answer is yes, not least thanks to the Mail Mog, so please keep them coming in. You are at least keeping me properly informed. Thank you. Earlier today, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, announced at this conference that plans are in place effectively to ban trans women from female hospital wards. Mr Barclay told delegates the NHS's constitution will be altered later this year to recognise the importance of different biological needs and protect the rights of women, meaning gender-segregated wards will only have patients of the specified biological sex, as well as ensuring that requests for same-sex carers will be respected. The past few years have seen many NHS documents all but erase references to women from information regarding female-specific issues such as pregnancy and cervical cancer. Some terms used include, quote, birthing parent, or mother as we might say, and person of childbearing potential. I'll give you a much easier way to say that: it's a woman. Why has our National Health Service been so intent on erasing women? The Health Secretary made the announcement after declaring, "I know as Conservatives we know what a woman is, and I know the vast majority of hard-working NHS staff and patients do too." Let's take a look at what he had to say.
This is why I ordered a reversal of unacceptable changes to the NHS website that erased references to women for conditions such as cervical cancer, and stopped the NHS ordering staff to declare pronouns to each new patient. And that is why today I am going further by announcing that we will change the NHS constitution following a consultation later this year to make sure we respect the privacy, dignity and safety of all patients, recognise the importance of different biological needs and protect the rights of women.
Miriam, isn't it simply odd that the NHS has done this as a publicly funded body, has tried to take women out of its documents, out of what you might call a narrative?
Well, it's odd, it's wrong, it's disturbing, it's a waste of money, and also obviously it's created a lot of fear and anxiety amongst women. I hear from women, especially older women, who know they've got to go into hospital and think that they may end up having a man on their ward, and that that's quite worrying. But I think unfortunately the Equality Act has this duty in it, this public sector equality duty, that almost compels our institutions to act in this way. And although I'm really appreciative of what Steve Barclay's done today, I think it's absolutely the right thing. Common sense thing to do. It's the right safeguarding thing to do. Ultimately, the government will be playing whack-a-mole with these policies unless we get rid of this public sector equality duty that is kind of weaponising these activist groups within our public sector institutions.
Particularly in the use of language, that saying birthing parent rather than mother is an abuse of language, isn't it? It doesn't make sense to most people.
That's right. It's trying to change language away from what ordinary people know that it means and it's meant for centuries. And that's what's so worrying about it. And I think it also diminishes people's confidence in the NHS. I've got a friend who took a friend of hers to a medical appointment in a hospital, and she overheard the gentleman in his 70s who's sitting next to her being asked by the nurse if he might be pregnant. Now, you can lie. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it also undermines your faith in the NHS as an evidence-based institution with competent clinicians.
Michael, this is a sensitive issue because one doesn't want to be unfair to transgender people. On the other hand, if somebody decides that they are a woman on the morning they go into hospital, that person clearly shouldn't go into a woman's ward.
Well, I mean, I can't defend any of the things that go on in the NHS in terms of the language that you've been talking about there. I think this is the much more delicate issue, I think Steve Barclay is going too far here, and it's not clear to me whether he's definitely doing this. I mean, he said in that clip there he was going to do it after a consultation. Well, what's the point of the consultation if he's definitely going to do it? But I think that you'd have to ask a number of questions here. I mean, have there actually been any incidents where, I mean, you may know about this and you may be able to answer, many incidents where there have been, say, sexual assaults on women by trans women in hospitals? I mean, we know about them in prisons, but in prisons they tend to be full of people who are either violent or dishonest, and
yes.
It may be more understandable. Whereas in hospitals, these are people who are ill, and the presumption must be that they are honest, decent people going into hospitals. And I think that the distress that is likely to be caused, quite apart from the inconvenience to the health service, I mean, where are they going to treat trans women otherwise? They're going to put them in private wards, single cubicle wards. I think this is going too far, and I think it's basically a dog whistle policy to rustle up votes.
Miriam, would you draw the line, or do you think there is a line to be drawn that somebody who has had an operation who was a man, ought to be on a women's ward? Or would you say that even somebody who'd had an operation and fully transitioned, if that's the right term, should still be in a separate ward?
I think the use of private wards would be the right way to go. And I think I don't like to play the gender card here, but I think as a woman, you have an evolved instinct to be wary of men you don't know. And that's a survival instinct. It's what's kept us safe for generations. And I think it's very difficult for men to understand what women feel like when they're in a situation where they're not in control and where there are men who are physically stronger in almost every single case are there. Now, that's not to say that every trans woman or even the majority of trans women are there for malicious purposes, but the fear that you feel as a woman, and I certainly know older women feel, knowing that there could be someone who is male on their ward, is very, very real. And the dignity, the loss of dignity, especially in a very vulnerable position, some people won't be able to get out of bed, the loss of dignity is very significant, and I think that's why hospital wards are so significant.
I still haven't heard as to whether there actually
There have been, yes.
How many?
I don't know numbers, but even one is too many.
Well, I think one is probably not too many for a radical change in policy like this, and I think that it is insulting to trans women that this should happen. And these are people who have often gone through a lot of stress in transitioning like this.
But Michael, nobody's saying that they shouldn't have care. Absolutely, they should have health care. But the important thing here is to protect women's safety and dignity at the same time as protecting the.
Also, they haven't necessarily transitioned. It's at the earlier stage, so that's important.
Whether they'd had an operation or not might be a compromise in this policy.
And the carers issue, the right to choose a same-sex carer. I mean, if you're going through security as a man and somebody waves a wand over you or pats you down, I don't care whether it's a man or a woman. But I completely understand that a woman would not want to be patted down by a man.
And I think
doesn't that apply to intimate care in hospital as well?
Well, to be honest, it's not an issue I've thought about. No, but I mean, a lot of women in hospitals are treated in pregnancy by men all the time. There's a lot of intimate examinations going on.
Always with a chaperone and always with consent.
Right.
And I think the problem here is that so many women have been in wards with trans women, so people who are male, without their consent. And there have been stories of women who have been told by the nurses that they are no longer eligible for treatment because they're transphobic, because they object to having a man on the ward.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to draw stumps there. But thank you, Miriam and Michael. After the break, we'll be assessing the effects of the 72-hour doctors' strike the National Health Service is currently enduring. Plus, we'll be discussing one of life's great joys, beef.
The Live Desk with me, Mark